Brenda's eyes widened as she stared at the screen, her face twisting with shock and fury. That recording, her own voice admitting to embezzling HOA funds and plotting to sell off community property, had just shattered her last shred of control. The room was dead silent, everyone frozen in place trying to process what they'd just heard. Her hands trembled as she tried to snatch the phone away, but it was too late. The evidence was out there now, loud and clear. She stumbled back, her carefully poised composure crumbling faster than her fake smiles. Her face was flushed red, her hair a disheveled mess from the stress, and her eyes darted wildly around the room like a cornered animal. "That's a lie," she hissed, voice cracking. "That's impossible. Someone's framing me. This is all a setup." But Richard Bennett, the pragmatic board member, stepped forward, his face stern. "Brenda, we have the bank statements, transaction records, and now your own voice admitting it. You can't deny it anymore." His voice was steady, but his eyes burned with disappointment. "You've stolen nearly 50 grand from this community. Money meant for repairs, maintenance, and our future. How do you plan to fix this?" Brenda's lips pressed into a thin line. Her mind raced, desperately searching for a way out. She looked around at the angry faces of her neighbors, some betrayed, others furious, all waiting for her to explain herself. But her pride was crumbling, and she knew the jig was up. "Everyone," she finally croaked, voice trembling. I was trying to do what was best. The clubhouse needed upgrades, the community was falling behind. I thought I was doing what was necessary to protect us all." Her words sounded hollow even to her own ears, and the room erupted with murmurs of disbelief. Then Marcus, who had been quietly watching from the back, stepped forward, his face grim. "I've been involved in this for months," he said, voice low but clear. "Brenda's been lying about a lot. I found bank transfers, large sums going into her personal account. She's been siphoning money for her own use and her plans to sell the clubhouse. That was just to cover her debts." The crowd's anger intensified. Someone shouted, "So she's been stealing from us all along?" "Exactly," Marcus confirmed. "And it's not just the money. She's been manipulating everyone, faking documents, lying about permits, even trying to hide the real state of the clubhouse. She's been using her position to cover her tracks, but now the truth is out." Brenda tried to protest, but her voice was drowned out by shouts and accusations. Her face was a mask of desperation, her carefully crafted image shattering into pieces. She tried to grab her purse, perhaps to make a hasty exit, but Richard was already standing beside her, firm. "Ma'am, I think you need to leave now," he said gravely. "The police are on their way, and there's no place for you here anymore." She looked around wildly, eyes darting for an escape, but the crowd was closing in. Some residents began recording her with their phones, others shouting for justice. Her knees buckled as she realized she was losing everything. Her reputation, her control, her freedom. In a final act of defiance, she looked directly at me, her voice shrill and trembling. "You think you've won? This isn't over. I will fight you all, and I'll make sure everyone pays for this." But her words fell flat as Marcus gently guided her toward the door, her off-duty security guard trailing behind, clearly embarrassed to be part of her chaos. The door swung shut behind her and silence fell over the room. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. The weight of months of lies and manipulation had finally lifted. The community was free from her grip, free from her lies, her theft, her petty power plays. And yet I knew this wasn't the end. Brenda was stubborn, desperately clinging to her last shred of control. Somewhere inside her, a storm was still brewing. She might have been gone from the community house, but her shadow still lurked, waiting to strike back in ways I couldn't yet see. But I wasn't worried. I had the truth on my side, and the evidence to back it up. I looked around at the gathered residents, some still shaking their heads in disbelief, others nodding in gratitude. "Now," I said, voice steady, "we can finally get our community back on track. The clubhouse will be repaired, our water supply secured, and transparency restored. Brenda's reign of lies is over, and from now on, we'll do things the right way." The room erupted into applause, some residents clapping, others simply sighing in relief. The nightmare was finally ending, and a new chapter was beginning, one built on honesty, justice, and a community that refused to be bullied anymore. As I stepped outside, I looked up at the sky, clear, peaceful, and finally, free from the chaos Brenda had tried to drown us in. I knew she wouldn't go down quietly, but that didn't matter anymore. We had won. The truth had won. And the community we loved was stronger than ever, absolutely. Here's a full-length, gripping continuation of the story, diving straight into the action, full of twists, suspense, and power without any boring setup. Enjoy this epic chapter. Brenda's face twisted with rage as her eyes darted wildly between the screen and the crowd. Her trembling hands clutched the phone tightly, clutching the damning recording that had just ripped her carefully crafted illusion to shreds. Her own voice confessing to embezzling funds, plotting to sell off the community's clubhouse, and even discussing her personal debts had shattered everything in an instant. Silence fell over the room, everyone frozen in shock, eyes glued to her trembling form. She tried to deny it, to scream that it was all a mistake, but her words were drowned out by the rising roar of anger. "That's a lie. It's all a lie," she shouted, voice cracking, her face flushed red with fury and panic. "Someone's framing me. This isn't real." Her eyes flicked desperately around the room, searching for an ally, a lifeline, anything to save her from the truth. But no one responded. Instead, the crowd's whispers grew into shouts, accusations flying like arrows. "Stealing from us all. How? Long has this been going on? Liar! Thief! Get her out of here!" The weight of the evidence pressed down on her like a vice, and she knew her empire was crumbling. Her carefully maintained facade, the confident HOA president, the community leader, was collapsing right before their eyes. Suddenly Marcus stepped forward, his face grim, eyes cold and unwavering. "I've seen the bank transfers," he said slowly, voice steady. "Large sums of money going into her personal account. Brenda Whitaker has been siphoning funds, embezzling from the community for months. And her plan to sell the clubhouse? That was just to cover her debts. She was planning to profit off our community's assets." The room erupted once more. Someone shouted, "She's been stealing all along." "Exactly," Marcus confirmed. "And she's been lying about everything, faking documents, hiding permits, even trying to cover up the real condition of the clubhouse. She's been manipulating all of us." Brenda's knees buckled. Her eyes widened in terror. Her face, pale as her last hopes, evaporated. Her mouth moved to speak, but no words came out, only ragged, desperate breaths. Her shoulders slumped, realizing she'd been caught, exposed, and defeated. Before she could make a move, Richard Bennett stepped in, voice commanding. "Ma'am, I think you should leave now," he said firmly, eyes blazing. "The police are on their way. You're under arrest for theft, embezzlement, and fraud." Her eyes flashed with panic, and she tried to pull away, her heels clicking on the floor as she was roughly guided toward the door. Her voice shrilled with fury and fear. "You'll regret this. I'll fight you all. You'll see I'm not finished yet." But her words faded into the air as the door slammed shut behind her. The room finally relaxed, doubt and relief washing over everyone in waves. The nightmare was over. Brenda's reign of lies, corruption, and theft had come crashing down in a single devastating blow. I stood silently, heart pounding in my chest, watching the crowd. For months I'd been fighting her, exposing her lies, risking everything to bring her down. Now it was finally done. The community was free from her grip. "Let's move forward," I said, voice steady but filled with determination. "The clubhouse needs repairs, the water supply needs securing, and we need to rebuild trust. Brenda's gone, and her reign of terror is over." A wave of applause erupted, some residents clapping, others simply nodding in silent agreement. Relief mixed with victory. The darkness that had loomed over us was lifting. We had survived. We had fought for what was right. And we'd won. Stepped outside into the crisp air, looking up at the clear evening sky. The storm had passed, and peace had finally returned to our community. Brenda was gone, and she'd taken her lies, her theft, and her destruction with her. Now we could finally breathe again, rebuild what had been broken, and move on stronger than ever before. But I knew she wasn't done. Brenda was stubborn, and she'd never accept defeat quietly. Somewhere in her shattered pride, she was already plotting her next move, waiting to strike again. I could feel it in my bones. Yet I wasn't afraid, not anymore. Because I had the truth, and that was all I needed. The community believed in justice. We believed in honesty, and we believed in each other. As I watched neighbors gather, some laughing, some crying, I knew this was only the beginning of a new chapter. The real fight had been won. The community was finally free. And from this moment on, we would stand tall, united, resilient, and ready to face whatever came next. The night was quiet now, peaceful and calm. But deep inside, I knew the real story wasn't over. Brenda might have been pushed out of the picture, but her shadow would linger for a while. Still, I was ready, because I'd learned something important. Sometimes the biggest battles come when you least expect them, and the strongest victories come when you refuse to back down. And as the lights of the community flickered softly, in the distance I looked at my cabin, knowing I'd finally won. The Christmas lights around my porch shone brighter than ever, amber, colorful, and alive. A symbol of rebellion, redemption, and the truth that had finally set us free. And I promised myself next Christmas I'd go even bigger, maybe some neon, maybe a full-blown light show. Because now I knew, sometimes standing up for what's right isn't just about the fight, it's about making sure everyone sees that justice can shine through even the darkest night. If you'd like, I can continue with more chapters or add specific twists to this story. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of the police sirens fading into the night. Brenda's body slumped against the cold wall, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief. All her life she had thought she was untouchable, that her secrets were buried deep and safe. But now everything had unraveled in mere moments, her lies exposed, her plans shattered, her empire crumbling before her very eyes. She had fought so hard, convinced herself that her cunning and manipulation would always keep her afloat. Yet here she was, trapped, cornered, staring down the inevitable. The evidence, the recordings, the bank statements, her own words, had been too much to hide. They had broken through her defenses like a battering ram, leaving her exposed, vulnerable. A voice broke through the heavy silence. It was Marcus, calm but commanding. "Brenda, there's no point in denying anymore. We have everything. Your lies, your thefts, your betrayals. The truth is out, and justice is finally catching up to you." His words cut deep, like a blade. She looked at him, trembling, her mind racing for a way out. But there was nothing left. Her carefully crafted mask, the one she had worn for so long, was shattered. The room, once filled with trust and false smiles, now felt like a cage closing in on her. Suddenly the door burst open. 2 police officers stepped in, their faces grim. One approached her, handcuffs ready. Brenda's eyes darted around desperately, her voice trembling. "Please, I can explain," she begged, voice cracking. But the officers only shook their heads, unyielding. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy," the officer announced. As they moved to cuff her, she tried to fight, to scream, but it was useless. Her world was collapsing. Her dreams of control, her illusions of power, all evaporated in seconds. The crowd outside had gathered, silent now, watching as she was led out, her head bowed low. The community that had once looked up to her now saw her for what she truly was, a criminal, a liar, a thief. They whispered among themselves, some with tears, others with anger. As Brenda was pushed into the police car, she threw one last look back at the house, the place where she had built her empire, only to watch it burn. Her mind raced, trying to find some shred of hope, some way to turn this around. But deep down she knew it was too late. The police drove away, wheels crunching over gravel, leaving her to face her fate. And for a moment, silence reigned. Then, a voice, calm, steady, powerful, broke through the stillness. It was me. "Everyone," I said softly but with conviction, "this is not just the end of Brenda. It's the beginning of something new. We've exposed the darkness, and now we rebuild stronger. But we must remember, corruption and greed can't hide forever, they always come to light. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. I looked around, feeling the weight of what had happened. Brenda's actions had almost destroyed us all. But we had fought back. We had uncovered the truth, and that truth had set us free. Just then, a shocking realization struck me, something I hadn't noticed before. As Brenda was taken away, a small, crumpled piece of paper fell from her pocket. I bent down and picked it up. It was a photograph, an old picture of her with someone I hadn't expected, her own sister, smiling, holding her hand. The twist hit me like a lightning bolt. Brenda's betrayal wasn't just about greed, it was about family secrets, long, buried and twisted. Her sister had been the one pushing her to steal, to cheat, to cover up the truth. Brenda's downfall wasn't just her own fault, it was a web of lies and lies within lies. My heart pounded. The story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Because if her sister was involved, then the real game was still hidden, in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. And as I looked toward the horizon, I realized something powerful. This wasn't just an ending. It was a new chapter, one filled with secrets, revelations, and the unbreakable strength of truth. Brenda might be gone, but her story, and the dark family secrets, would haunt us all until they were finally brought into the light. The night grew darker, but hope flickered brighter than ever. The truth had escaped the shadows, and now the real fight to rebuild, to heal, and to uncover the final secrets was just beginning. And I was ready. Because sometimes, the greatest stories don't end with victory, they begin with it.